Spoiler alert, this one's unsolved, which kind of makes me itch a little bit, but... Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime?
Crue Trime.
Crue Trime, what's that? My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to ruin your day and put on my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds like fun to you, you're in the right place. So make sure you subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification, and then that way you will never miss one of my terrible stories. So I've been trying to go to each state in the United States to find something awful to talk about, and there's no shortage. So today's story takes us to the state where the first atomic bomb was ever detonated. It features more PhDs per capita than any other state. Very interesting. And it's also the home to the world's largest hot air balloon festival. Like over 500 hot air balloons. How magical. Also, so much alien stuff.
I woke up in a dirty metal dome and 40 little gray aliens watched me pee in a steel bowl.
Lots of UFOs. This is New Mexico, and this is the Las Cruces Bowling Alley Massacre. So if you are interested to know what makeup I'm using, because I don't really talk about it as I'm using it, just look down in the description box. Everything down there is linked if it's available. And I say if it's available because I use stuff that's, you know, older for me. Probably not for sale anymore, but if you have it, this is what I'm using. Let's get started. So on February 10th, 1990, around 8 o'clock in the morning, college student Steve Senack arrived at his family business, the Las Cruces Bowl. It's a bowling alley located at 1201 East Amador Avenue in the small college town of Las Cruces, New Mexico. Wikipedia describes Las Cruces as a small college town, but it's actually the second largest city in New Mexico after Albuquerque. I mean, maybe at the time in 1990 it was considered small, but anyways. So the city is just north of the border of Mexico. And fun fact, it's actually now the location of the headquarters for Virgin Galactic, the company that does those suborbital space flights. So much space stuff. Anyway, so Steve the night before had forgotten his backpack there and he needed it for his morning class. So as he pulled up and parked in the parking lot, he noticed two men off to the side, you know. One of them had a briefcase. Weird. Maybe, but you know, the bowling alley wasn't even open yet for the day, so Steve was also in a hurry. He did not approach, he just went inside. The bowling alley was owned by Steve's father, Ron Senack. He had actually been staying there for the past few months because he sold his house, but he was out of town for the weekend, not around. Okay, so as I mentioned, they weren't open quite yet, so Steve had actually expected to need to knock on the door, but he found it unlocked. So he just went inside. He found his 34-year-old sister, Stephanie. She was the manager. She was in the office counting out money from the night before because they didn't do deposits at night. She was balancing the books and also setting up money trays for the ticket window and the snack bar. So after Steve grabbed his backpack, he reminded Stephanie, "You need to keep the doors locked when they're not open," and then he left. So also inside the building was Stephanie's 12-year-old daughter, Melissa Repass, and Melissa's 13-year-old friend, Amy Hauser. Amy's stepdad had dropped her off that morning, and there was a daycare actually inside the bowling alley, and Amy and Melissa were just kind of helping out for the day. Ida Holguin, the cook, she was already there as well, prepping the snack bar for the day. The door was scheduled to open at 9 a.m. and they were expecting like 50 Las Cruces Youth Bowling League members, so Ida was really busy. Melissa had popped into the kitchen to ask Ida, you know, please can you make us a snack? But Ida was just too busy. She's like, I promise I'll make you something later, but I can't right now. So instead, the girls went to the office to get some change for the vending machines. Candy. Why not? Just as Amy and Melissa were choosing their snacks, a stranger approached with a gun. He made them go back into the office with Melissa's mom, Stephanie. A second man with a gun approached Ida in the kitchen and made her go into the office too. Once they were inside the office, the two gunmen ordered the four ladies to lie down on the floor face down. So the gunmen seemed to be looking for something. They were going through the filing cabinets and the desk and then finally asked Stephanie to open the safe. She did what they asked and they took between $4,000 and $5,000 cash and put it in the briefcase. Interestingly, they didn't take all of the money, though they could have. They definitely had, stuff to carry it. So as this is all happening, the lane mechanic showed up, 26-year-old Stephen Tehran. He arrived for his shift that day, and he actually had his daughters with him, 6-year-old Paula and 2-year-old Valerie. Steve had previously served in the National Guard and had just graduated from New Mexico State University with his bachelor's degree in criminal justice 2 months before this. He was really looking forward to taking the entrance exam to the Las Cruces Police Department, and he had actually put in his 2 weeks notice already there at Las Cruces Bowl. So Stephen's wife, Audrey, was at school, so he would often bring the girls to the daycare at the bowling alley while he worked. Okay, so once inside the building, Steve didn't see anybody. Ida wasn't in the kitchen where she would normally be, and the girls weren't in the daycare where they would normally be, so he went into the office to look for Stephanie, and he found way more than he bargained for. The 2 gunmen demanded that Steve and the little girls get down on the floor too. So all 7 people are now lying down on the floor in the office, and the intruders have this briefcase full of cash from the safe, and they could just leave, But no. Instead, the 2 men opened fire on all of them, shooting them multiple times at point-blank range. Each person was shot in the head, and most had several body shots as well. The men then took a bunch of papers from the office and lit them all on fire. Then they left. So immediately after they left, 12-year-old Melissa, who the only one, as far as she knows, is conscious, she crawled over to the phone and called 911.
Emergency.
Please help me.
Oh, well, slow down.
We were all shot and hold up.
Okay. Where are you at?
1201 East Amador, Las Cruces Bowl.
Las Cruces Bowl?
Yes.
Okay, and there were shots fired?
Yes. All of us were hurt.
So remember, this is 1990, okay, and it's smallish town, Las Cruces. They had only had 2 homicides the previous year, so they weren't exactly used to getting these wild calls like this. They were not ready. And I don't mean they couldn't handle it. I mean just they were shocked. Eyebrows. I'll be right back. Okay, so Melissa told the 911 operator named Jim Hash that there had been a holdup at Las Cruces Bowl, and she told them that all 7 of them had been shot, and she had been shot in the head. Melissa was holding her mom's hand, trying to get her to wake up. She was too scared to really look at anybody else. It was just awful. Jim was very calm and reassuring and patient and assured Melissa that police and firefighters were on their way. And Melissa was able to give really clear instructions on, where they were, because it's a large building, right? So when the police got there, they found her right away, and he stayed on the line with her until she was safe. So the first officer got to the bowling alley really quickly, within minutes. And the fire was spreading fast. And this fire was really destroying everything in its path, filling the building with thick smoke. When the firefighters entered the office and dragged everybody out away from the fire, they were able to isolate the fire and put it out without losing the building, but lots of evidence totally lost. So ambulances and teams of paramedics arrived, and they knew that they were responding to a report of 7 people with gunshot wounds, so they actually had doctors accompany the ambulance to assess the victims there on the scene. So they set up triage right there in the bowling alley to be as efficient as possible. Sadly, 13-year-old Amy Hauser, 26-year-old Steve Tehran, and 6-year-old Paula Holgan were all declared dead at the scene. So the remainder of the victims were all taken to the hospital there in Las Cruces. Everyone had gunshot wounds to the head of some sort, and 2-year-old Valerie was still alive at the scene, but died shortly after she arrived at the hospital. Ida Holguin and Stephanie Senac were unconscious but alive. Melissa Repass was taken to the hospital and treated for multiple gunshot wounds as well. So the typically quiet town of Las Cruces was suddenly blaring with sirens. Every available police car, ambulance, and fire truck had come to the scene. So Audrey Tehran, Steve's wife, mother of Paula and Valerie, was at the nearby college and was hearing sirens in class. When she was finally able to get to a phone, she tried calling the bowling alley to see what was going on, but she couldn't get a hold of anybody, of course. By lunchtime, a friend was able to take her over to the bowling alley, and she finally learned the terrible news. Steve and Paula were both dead. Valerie had been taken to the hospital, but Valerie had actually only lasted about 45 minutes after she arrived before she passed away. The gunshot wound to her head had traveled in such a way that even if she had survived, she would have been paralyzed from the neck down. Gloria Woods, the bakery manager at the Solo warehouse, had a similar morning. Gloria's 13-year-old daughter, Amy Hauser, had been working at the bowling alley daycare that day with her friend Melissa. When Gloria heard the news that something bad had happened at the bowling alley, she tried calling there. Again, no answer. When she rushed over to try to find her daughter, she was eventually told by a detective that her daughter was one of the victims who had died at the scene. Immediately following the shooting, the Las Cruces police coordinated with the local U.S. Border Patrol to set up roadblocks in and out of town. It effectively closed the entire city. They remained up all day and into the night. So there was one vehicle that was actually stopped at one of those roadblocks, and the driver inside had close to $11,000 in cash. They brought in Steve Senack to see if he recognized that person. Remember, we can assume those guys in the parking lot, these are the guys. They didn't look familiar at all. Weird coincidence? Who knows? So the bowling alley, of course, was roped off, and they brought in teams from the State Department of Public Safety in Santa Fe to process the scene fully. The Las Cruces Police Department received assistance from the New Mexico State Police, Dona Ana County Sheriff's Department, and the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. They also used 6 airplanes and a helicopter to search all of Las Cruces the day of the shooting and, the days following. So Stephanie, Ida, and Melissa all survived that day, but the details of the shooting and the robbery were kind of minimal for a while. Remember, they'd all suffered gunshot wounds to the head and this terrible, awful trauma. They needed time to recover before they could be questioned, meaningfully anyways. It was nearly 2 weeks before any detailed interviews could be conducted. They did have the 911 call recordings, so when they reviewed them back, they heard Jim ask Melissa if she could describe the men, what they were wearing. They had all been forced to lie down face down, so she couldn't really see anything, but she did describe the men as black, but also, bowling alleys don't have the best lighting. Am I right? In a later interview, she was able to clarify that she misspoke. The men were Hispanic. Combined with the description from Steve Senack regarding the 2 men he saw in the parking lot that morning, they were able to work with a composite sketch artist to come up with pictures, drawings of the suspects for the police. Later, when Stephanie, Melissa, and Ida were each able to provide more details, it really closely matched the sketch and sharpened up the picture, as it were. It was definitely the 2 guys from the parking lot, and Ida also said that she had definitely seen these 2 men in the bowling alley at least once before. So, the description of the 2 men. Shooter number 1, the younger guy, estimated to be in his late 20s, early 30s, Hispanic male, 5'10", 160 to 170 pounds with wavy brown hair, bushy mustache, and he spoke very clear English with no accent. Shooter number 2 was the older one. He was estimated to be in his 40s or early 50s, Hispanic male, 5'6" tall, 140 pounds-ish, with gray, white, thinning hair, brown eyes, and he also spoke clear English, but with a very slight Spanish accent. There were 5 detectives originally assigned to the case full-time, as well as a crime analyst. They had plenty of tips and leads, but after each was investigated, they were left with no answers. The killers didn't wear masks or try to conceal their identity at all, but that didn't really seem to matter. Over 300 suspects were interviewed and eventually eliminated. Firefighters had inadvertently destroyed evidence when they were putting out that fire in the office, which was very likely intentional. There was more evidence lost while trying to save the victims. And remember, back then, it's 1990, so DNA forensic evidence, was very new, if it was a thing at all, and it was just not really used for widespread identification. The primary focus for identification of a criminal was, fingerprints. But you know what? Think about it. It's a bowling alley. Hundreds of people come in every day and touch all the things. Some of the investigators believed that this was a random robbery, while others believed that it was targeted. Some say that a Mexican crime syndicate was involved, considering Las Cruces is only 41 miles from the border of Mexico. Barry Swanson was the crime analyst that's been on the case since the beginning, and he has a different theory. He believed that this was a targeted attack and possibly some form of retribution. The theory is that the owner of the building, Ron Cenac, could have either been involved in setting it up, or perhaps it was payback for someone he wronged. He owned the building, it was his family members, daughter and granddaughter, that were both shot. Also, there's this very curious fact that he reopened the bowling alley less than a week after the shooting. Squinting at you. Well, investigators started to kind of pay attention to some of the rumors around town involving Ron Cenac. People say that he was involved in some, shady business. What kind of, they don't know. Drugs, maybe? Who knows? They also said that he was maybe even connected to the Mexican cartels that were certainly active in that area. I mean, when you think about it, that's not really a crazy theory. Whoever did this wasn't going to leave any witnesses behind, even small children, 2-year-old children. If this was meant to convey a very strong message, it worked. Thousands of hours were spent trying to chase down any possible leads that could prove this cartel theory, but nothing ever panned out. They also looked into Ron's younger son, RJ, who was not there at all that day, but he had a little cocaine problem. But nothing. Every road that they went down led to nothing. Interestingly, 1 month before the bowling alley shooting, approximately 3 miles down the road from the bowling alley at Ray's Shell service station, a man was murdered. The clerk, Salvador Lozano, had been shot in the head at close range, and only $500 had been taken. Now, police say that they don't think that the two are connected, but locals are squinting because that case is unsolved also. So in the months and years after the bowling alley shooting, the survivors started a long road to recovery. Stephanie Cenac had very serious injuries, including a gunshot wound to the head, and she suffered serious long-term health complications, as you'd imagine. Stephanie used to be really fun and outgoing, and after the shooting, she was pretty much a shut-in, terrified to leave her home. I don't blame her. Apparently, Stephanie was terrified that the shooters were going to come and find her and hurt her again. So we can safely assume that she was suffering from some serious post-traumatic stress on top of all of the physical pain from the injuries. In 1999, Stephanie actually passed away from complications of her shooting-related injuries. Gloria Woods, Amy's mother, stayed in Las Cruces after the incident, raising her family, and over the years, she has welcomed 2 grandchildren. Audrey Terran, the widow of Steve Terran, moved to El Paso, Texas to be closer to her family. She never went back to the home that she shared with Steve and her daughters, the family that was essentially annihilated that day. Over the years, she has remarried and has had 2 more children. Melissa Repass, who bravely called 911 that day, now is the mother of 2 children and kind of lives quietly under the radar. Ida Holguin spent 6 months in the hospital after the shooting. She had been shot in the head 3 times, so it's honestly a miracle that she survived at all. She suffered a traumatic brain injury that took years of therapy to get her to a point of just a semblance of normalcy. Her recovery has also included post-traumatic stress and hypervigilance. Hypervigilance, as you can imagine, is when you're just on edge all the time, fight or flight all the time. Terrible. She hasn't been able to work since the shooting, but she still lives in Las Cruces with her family. Ida Holguin actually spoke with the Las Cruces news affiliate about a year ago regarding what happened that day. She said that she just really wants the case to be solved. It's nice to hold the memorials and vigils every year to remember everyone, the anniversary of the event, but what she really wants is for the conversation about the case to keep going until it gets resolved.
I don't mind them talking to me, knowing them to tell me what they found out or what's new or...
But it's time this thing is solved.
Yes.
Long overdue.
Yes.
In November 2004 and again in March 2010, the story of the murders was featured on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. In 2011, a filmmaker named Charlie Min created a full-length documentary called A Nightmare in Las Cruces.
I was completely floored by what I saw. I was struck, I was angered, I was deeply saddened by the degree of unfairness, by the barbaric nature of how children were executed.
It's quite well done. It's hard to watch, but it's definitely aimed at, re-energizing interest in the case and, keeping the conversation going. Ida and Melissa were initially not into the film. They thought it could be exploitive, but they realized that it was their opportunity to tell their story and bring the case back into public view. Many podcasts have covered the story, and tips seem to be called in after episodes, so the hope is that that'll keep happening until the case is solved. If you have any information that you think could be helpful in solving this case, please contact the Las Cruces Crime Stoppers at the number on the screen. I'll put it right here. You can call in anonymously. You can also text in tips, and I'll leave some more resources down in the description box too, so please check that out. And that, friends, is the story of the Las Cruces Bowling Alley Massacre. Again, if you're interested to know any of the makeup that I used in today's video, look down in the description box. Everything is linked for you. If you have a recommendation for a Crue Trime story that you would like me to tell, then look also down in the description box. There's a Google Doc for you to complete and leave all the details. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on most of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! If you... After... Fucking... I can never decide what brush to use. Shit. No. Stop. Hello? Oh, shit. Today. What am I talking about?